The Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club thought they had found an easy mark in Riverside Valley, Arizona, a disabled veteran in a wheelchair who managed the local community center. Their attempt to extort him would become their worst nightmare. What they didn't know was that Marcus "Ghost" Thompson wasn't just another wounded warrior. He was a former Army Special Forces commander with direct lines to the highest levels of military intelligence. Their encounter would expose a weapons trafficking operation spanning 3 states, uncover a network of corrupt law enforcement, and lead to the most unexpected story of justice in Arizona history. The morning heat already shimmered across Riverside Valley's main street as Marcus Thompson guided his wheelchair past Martinez's coffee shop, where Rosa Martinez was setting out her signature fresh-baked pastries. At 48, his broad shoulders and steel-gray eyes spoke of a life shaped by both service and sacrifice. Local residents offered friendly waves as he passed Carson's auto repair, where old Jim Carson was already working under the hood of a dusty pickup truck. The scent of fresh coffee and desert flowers drifted through the early morning air as Marcus paused at the entrance to the Riverside Valley Community Center. His trained eyes automatically scanned the street. Old habits from his Special Forces days died hard, even after 3 years of civilian life. The single-story adobe building had become his sanctuary after Kandahar, a place where he could help fellow veterans while maintaining a low profile. The sign above the door read, "Riverside Valley Veterans and Community Center," its paint still fresh from last month's renovation. Inside, the morning light streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floor. Michael "Doc" Rodriguez was already there, arranging chairs for the morning's PTSD support group. The former Navy corpsman looked up as Marcus entered, his weathered face creasing with a warm smile. "Morning, Ghost," he called out, using Marcus's old call sign. "Coffee's fresh." Before Marcus could respond, the distant rumble of motorcycles shattered the morning quiet. His hands stilled on his wheelchair's rims, mind automatically calculating distances and approaches. Through the windows, he watched 8 motorcycles roar into view, their chrome gleaming in the desert sun. "Iron Wolves," Doc muttered, moving to stand beside him. "They've been pushing into towns across the state. Heard they took over New Haven last month." The bikers parked in a practiced formation that blocked most of the street. Their leader, a tall man whose leather cut displayed the patch Razor, dismounted with deliberate swagger. Behind him, 7 others spread out, Bear, built like a concrete wall, Shadow, whose quiet movements spoke of military training, Viper, whose jacket bulged with concealed weapons, Storm, whose hands never strayed far from his vest, Wolf, whose eyes constantly scanned for threats, and 2 prospects bringing up the rear. Rosa Martinez hurried to lock her coffee shop's door as they approached, but she wasn't fast enough. Razor caught the handle first, his smile all teeth and menace. "Now that ain't friendly," he said, voice carrying across the quiet street. "We're just some hungry riders looking for breakfast." Marcus watched through the community center windows as Rosa reluctantly reopened her door, his mind cataloging details automatically. Razor's military boot print, Shadow's favoring of his left leg, the way Viper's jacket hung indicating a shoulder holster. "Should we call Sheriff Davis?" Doc asked quietly. "Not yet," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the calm of countless combat operations. "Let's see what they're really after." The answer came sooner than expected. While Razor and 3 others entered the coffee shop, Bear and Storm approached the community center, their boots scraping deliberately across the clean sidewalk as they pushed through the door. "Well, ain't this nice?" Bear drawled, his massive frame filling the doorway. "Real community service you got here." Marcus positioned his wheelchair carefully, noting angles and distances, keeping both men in view. Doc stood his ground by the coffee station, his posture relaxed but ready. "Center opens at 9, Marcus said evenly. "You're welcome to return then." Storm laughed, the sound empty of humor. "Ain't here for services, friend. Town's changing. Businesses need protection these days. Accidents happen." Through the windows, Marcus could see Razor watching from the coffee shop, his predatory gaze measuring responses. He had seen that look before in places far from Riverside Valley's quiet streets. The calculation of a man judging resistance, planning conquest. The community center doesn't pay protection money, he stated firmly. Never has, never will. Bear's smile turned ugly. Brave words from someone who can't even stand up. He kicked Marcus's wheelchair, not hard enough to tip it, just enough to demonstrate power. Be a shame if something happened to your nice building, or to the vets who come here for help. Doc took a step forward, but Marcus raised his hand slightly. Wait. He met Bear's gaze steadily, letting none of his tactical calculations show. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. No, buddy, Storm replied, dropping all pretense of friendliness. You're the one making a mistake. Razor wants $2,000 by Friday. After that, the price goes up along with the accidents. They swaggered out, leaving behind the stink of leather and threat. Through the windows, Marcus watched them return to the coffee shop where Rosa Martinez served them with trembling hands, while Razor held court like a conquering king. We should call Sheriff Davis, Doc repeated, but his voice carried doubt. Riverside Valley's law enforcement had been suspiciously quiet since Iron Wolf's first appearances 2 weeks ago. Not yet, Marcus replied, his mind already formulating plans. First, we need to understand what we're really dealing with. He wheeled himself to the office where a hidden compartment contained surveillance equipment he'd hoped never to need again. They think they found an easy target. Time to let them keep thinking that while we learn everything about them. Doc studied his face, recognition dawning in his eyes. You've seen their type before, in places far from here. They're not just thugs looking for easy money, Marcus confirmed quietly. That military bearing, the practiced formations, the way they gauge responses. They're testing the town's defenses, looking for weak points. This is just the beginning. As if confirming his words, Razor's voice carried from the coffee shop, loud enough for the street to hear. Riverside Valley's going to learn some new rules, starting today. Marcus began unpacking his surveillance gear, his movements precise and practiced. The wind carried the rumble of more motorcycles approaching town, and with them, the certainty that Riverside Valley's quiet days were ending. The Iron Wolves MC thought they had found an easy mark in a disabled veteran. They were about to learn why appearances could be deceiving, and why Marcus Thompson still had one phone call that could change everything. Evening shadows crept across Riverside Valley as Marcus positioned himself near the Iron Wolves' newly established clubhouse. The abandoned gas station at the edge of town had been transformed over the past week, its broken windows replaced with tinted glass, security cameras mounted at strategic points. Through his surveillance scope, he watched members come and go, noting patterns and hierarchies. Doc's voice came quietly through his earpiece. Sheriff Davis just left the clubhouse, 3rd time this week. Money changing hands? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. He'd seen the envelope Razor had passed to the sheriff, watching Davis's face as he pocketed what was clearly more than a donation to the police benevolent fund. Like clockwork, Doc confirmed. Rosa's got more information too. You need to hear this. The coffee shop had closed early, officially for cleaning. In reality, Rosa Martinez had turned it into an impromptu meeting place away from the gang's prying eyes. Marcus wheeled himself through the back entrance where Doc waited with Rosa. The usually composed coffee shop owner's hands shook slightly as she poured coffee. They're moving weapons, Rosa said quietly, setting down the pot. I overheard Storm and Viper talking. Military-grade stuff. They called it special inventory for some buyer coming to inspect the operation next week. Marcus's jaw tightened. Weapons trafficking. The pieces were falling into place. The increased security, the late-night deliveries, the carefully coordinated movements between towns. That's why they're pushing so hard to control local businesses. They need cover for their real operation. A motorcycle rumbled past the coffee shop, its rider scanning the darkened windows. They waited in silence until the sound faded. I've seen this before, Rosa continued, her voice harder now. In Tucson before I moved here. My brother, he was a customs officer. He started asking questions about missing weapons shipments. She paused, composing herself. We never found his body. Doc placed a supportive hand on Rosa's shoulder while Marcus processed the information. The sheriff? He asked. Bought and paid for, Doc confirmed. But my contacts at the VA say it's bigger than Davis. There's word of similar operations in other towns, all following the same pattern. Iron Wolves moves in, corrupts local law enforcement, establishes businesses as fronts. Marcus moved to the coffee shop's window, watching the street through a gap in the blinds. A group of bikers had cornered old Jim Carson outside his auto repair shop, their postures suggesting another protection discussion. They're getting bolder, he observed, moving faster than they did in other towns. Something's driving their timeline. Through his earpiece, Marcus heard movement at the community center. They're at the center, Doc reported quietly. Razor and some others. They're looking for you. Through the darkened windows, Marcus watched 3 Iron Wolves members circle his wheelchair van, their intentions clear. It was time. He reached for his phone, fingers hovering over a number he'd hoped never to need again. Make the call, Doc urged, recognizing the look in his friend's eyes. Whatever you're thinking, whatever resources you've got, it's time. Marcus nodded slowly. Get everything ready. I'll need those files we discussed. He wheeled toward the back door, his voice carrying quiet authority. And Doc, tell Rosa to keep watching, keep recording. We're about to show Iron Wolves why you don't underestimate wounded warriors. The evening air had cooled as Marcus approached the community center. Through the windows, he could see Razor and his men inside, methodically destroying equipment. Medical supplies for veterans lay scattered across the floor, counseling records torn and trampled. Marcus pulled out his phone, dialing a number few knew existed. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Ghost? Been a long time. General Harrison, Marcus replied quietly. Remember that favor you owe me from Kandahar? I'm calling it in. But first, I need you to listen carefully to what's happening in Riverside Valley. Inside the center, Razor looked up at Marcus's approach, his smile predatory. $2,000 was a reasonable offer, he called out. Now the price is $5,000, plus damages. Marcus wheeled himself into the room, deliberately positioning himself with clear lines to all exits. His phone call remained connected, transmitting everything. The center helps veterans recover from war, he said calmly. We operate on donations. Razor laughed, picking up a framed photo of Marcus's old Special Forces team. Cute picture. You some kind of military fanboy? He studied the image closer, his smile faltering slightly as he recognized the unit insignia. Behind him, Bear moved toward the office where confidential veteran records were kept. Maybe we need to know more about these veterans you help, Razor continued. Their families, their weaknesses. That's private information, Marcus stated, his voice carrying an edge that made Shadow shift uneasily. Something in his tone triggered the former soldier's combat instincts. Nothing's private in our town, Razor replied. He picked up another photograph, studying it with exaggerated interest. Lots of important-looking people in these pictures, Ghost. That is what they called you, right? Back in Special Forces? Marcus watched Bear rifling through files, heard the sound of papers being destroyed. One move and he could disable Razor before the others reacted. But not yet. The timing wasn't right. Through his phone, General Harrison was hearing everything, understanding exactly what was happening in this small Arizona town. Last chance, Marcus said quietly. Leave the files, leave the center, find another town. Razor laughed, dropping the photo. Glass shattered across the floor. Or what? You'll roll over our feet? He turned to Storm. Find anything valuable, then burn it. Make an example. Marcus's fingers tightened on his wheelchair's arms, but his voice remained steady. You think because I can't walk, I can't fight back. That's your first mistake. Yeah? Razor leaned down, getting in his face. And what's my second? Assuming I'm alone. Marcus allowed himself a small smile, one that made Razor straighten up uncertainly. General, did you get all that? Through his phone, Harrison's voice carried clearly in the sudden silence. Every word, Ghost. Special Forces teams are already moving. You were right. These aren't just local thugs. We've been tracking missing weapons across 3 states. Keep them talking. Help is coming. The silence in the community center stretched for a long moment as Razor processed what he'd just heard. His face shifted from confusion to anger to something closer to fear as he recognized the authority in General Harrison's voice. "You're wired," he snarled, reaching for Marcus's phone. But Marcus was already moving, his wheelchair pivoting with practiced precision as he evaded Razor's grasp. "Every word you've said, everything you've done, it's all been recorded and transmitted," Marcus explained calmly. "Not just to General Harrison, but to a joint task force that's been tracking weapons disappearing from military bases. You just gave them probable cause." Through the windows, Marcus could see more iron wolves arriving, drawn by some sixth sense that their operation was in danger. Storm moved toward the door, but Marcus's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't. Satellite surveillance is already tracking everyone who enters or leaves this building." "You're bluffing," Bear growled, but his eyes darted uncertainly between Marcus and the windows. "You're just some crippled vet running a community center." "Ghost," General Harrison's voice came through the phone again. "Teams are 10 minutes out. Local FBI office has been briefed. Keep them contained." Razor's hand moved toward his jacket, but Marcus's voice carried a new tone of command. "Think carefully about your next move. Right now, you're looking at weapons trafficking charges. Draw that weapon, and it becomes attempted murder of a federal intelligence asset." Outside, sirens began to wail in the distance. Through his earpiece, Doc reported movement at the Iron Wolves clubhouse. "They're trying to destroy evidence, Ghost. Moving crates out the back." "Too late," Marcus replied, loud enough for Razor to hear. "Surveillance teams have been documenting your operation for weeks. Every shipment, every payoff, every threat. Sheriff Davis's cooperation bought you time, but it also proved the corruption we suspected." Razor's facade cracked slightly. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. This goes higher than some small-town protection racket. We've got connections." "To the Carson Military Base Weapons Depot?" Marcus finished for him. "To the 3 missing shipments of automatic weapons? To the Serbian buyers arriving next week?" He watched Razor's face pale. "Like I said, we've been building this case for months. You just gave us the final piece." Through the windows, they could see Doc coordinating with Rosa and other community members, directing them away from what was about to become a tactical operation zone. More sirens joined the first, getting closer. "Ghost," General Harrison's voice crackled through the phone. "FBI tactical teams are approaching from the south. Special forces coming in from the north. Do you need immediate extraction?" Before Marcus could respond, Razor made his move. His hand flashed toward his weapon, but years of Special Forces training hadn't abandoned Marcus just because he was in a wheelchair. His response was instant and precise, turning Razor's own momentum against him. The gang leader crashed into Bear, sending both men sprawling. Shadow, recognizing professional combat skills, immediately raised his hands in surrender. "He's military intelligence," he warned the others. "Look at how he moves." Storm tried to run, but Doc had anticipated this. Through his earpiece, Marcus heard the satisfying sound of the former corpsman introducing Storm's face to the sidewalk. "Got one trying to flee," Doc reported calmly. "He's taking a nap now." The first FBI vehicles screeched to a halt outside, tactical teams deploying with practiced efficiency. Through the windows, Marcus watched more Iron Wolves members being intercepted as they tried to flee the clubhouse. "We could have made you rich," Razor spat from the floor, still struggling under Bear's weight. "Given you a piece of something big." "I already have something bigger," Marcus replied, watching federal agents enter the building. "A community worth protecting. Veterans who deserve better than having their town corrupted by weapons traffickers." General Harrison's voice came through one final time. "Ghost, my teams just reached the clubhouse. You were right. Military-grade weapons, documents showing international connections. This is bigger than we thought." The FBI tactical commander approached Marcus, recognition in his eyes. "Captain Thompson, General Harrison briefed us, said you were running counter-surveillance here, building the case we needed." Marcus nodded. They thought a disabled veteran was an easy target, made them sloppy, kept pushing until they exposed their whole operation. As federal agents secured the suspects, Doc entered with Rosa and other community members. They surveyed the damaged center, but their eyes showed pride rather than defeat. You knew, Doc said quietly. When they first showed up, you already knew they were part of something bigger. Suspected, Marcus corrected. 3 military bases reporting missing weapons, small towns suddenly facing organized takeovers. It fit a pattern. They just needed someone to give them enough rope to hang themselves. Through the open doors, they could hear more sirens as state police arrived to help secure the scene. Sheriff Davis's patrol car was conspicuously absent. Davis won't run, Marcus assured the FBI commander. Not with what we have on him. By morning, this operation will be exposed all the way to the top. Rosa Martinez straightened the fallen photographs, her hands no longer shaking. My brother. Maybe now we'll finally know what happened. We'll know, Marcus promised. People like Razor, they think they can prey on small towns, corrupt local police, use veterans as cover for their operations. They forget that some of us never stopped serving, never stopped protecting what matters. Outside, the desert night was alive with police lights and federal vehicles. The Iron Wolves MC had thought they found an easy mark in a disabled veteran. Instead, they'd unknowingly triggered an operation months in the making, led by a warrior who understood that true strength wasn't measured by the ability to stand, but by the courage to stand up for what's right. In the secure command center of the FBI's Phoenix field office, Marcus watched surveillance feeds showing simultaneous raids across 3 states. His wheelchair was positioned near the main tactical display, where General Harrison's face filled one of the screens. 9 weapons caches recovered so far, Harrison reported, his expression grim. Most of it military grade. Enough firepower to arm a small army. But that's not the worst of it. Through other monitors, they watched FBI teams discovering more than just weapons. Human trafficking, Special Agent Torres announced, entering with fresh intelligence. The weapons were just part of it. They were using the same routes, same corrupted officials to move people across state lines. Marcus's jaw tightened as he studied documents showing the full scope of the Iron Wolves operation. The weapons gave them leverage over local law enforcement, he observed. But trafficking gave them leverage over everyone else. Families threatened, witnesses silenced. Sheriff Davis is talking, Doc reported through the secure line. Says they threatened his daughter when he tried to resist. But he's naming names, lots of them. Other corrupt officials, buyers, suppliers. The tactical display lit up with new targets as Davis's information was confirmed. Marcus watched federal teams moving into position around suspected Iron Wolves safe houses. They're running, Agent Torres noted, tracking vehicle movements. Razor's second-in-command just tried to flee across the Nevada border. Let them run, Marcus replied calmly. Every movement, every contact they make, it all helps us map their network. Through his earpiece, he heard Rosa's voice from the community center where she was helping coordinate local intelligence. Ghost, Elena Carson just came forward. Says they were using her father's auto shop to store weapons. Jim was being blackmailed. Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. That's why Carson was acting strange lately. Why he kept his garage open late at night. He turned to Agent Torres. We need to check every business they pressured for protection money. They weren't just extorting cash. They were creating a network of storage and distribution points, Torres finished. Using local businesses as cover, clever. General Harrison's voice cut through their discussion. Ghost, we've got movement at Carson Military Base. Senior officers trying to destroy records. Your suspicions about internal corruption were right. Marcus wheeled to another monitor, watching surveillance footage of frantic activity at the base. Not just senior officers, he observed. Look at their formations, their security patterns. These are Special Forces veterans. Iron Wolves recruited them specifically. Because they knew the base's security protocols, Torres added, knew exactly what weapons to take, when shipments would be vulnerable. Through the command center's windows, they could see more federal vehicles deploying. The operation was expanding beyond just a local gang investigation. They're searching Carson's office now, Harrison reported. Found evidence linking him to weapons disappearing from 3 other bases. This goes higher than we thought. Marcus studied tactical displays showing Iron Wolves members being arrested across multiple states, but something in their behavior caught his attention. They're too calm, he observed. These aren't men who think they're facing serious time. Because they think they're protected, a new voice announced. FBI Deputy Director Chen entered the command center, her presence indicating the case's growing importance. We just intercepted communications. Someone high up in the Defense Department has been running interference, blocking investigations into missing weapons. Ghost. Doc's urgent voice came through the secure line. Rosa just got a call from her contact at the Serbian embassy. The weapons buyers, they're not just arms dealers, they're working for foreign intelligence. The implications hit hard. Marcus's mind raced through connections. That's why they needed the trafficking operation, not just for profit but for leverage, compromising material on military officers, local officials, anyone who could expose them. It gets worse, Chen added, spreading classified documents across the tactical table. The weapons aren't just being sold, they're being strategically placed, creating hidden caches across the country. Someone's preparing for something big. Through surveillance feeds, they watched more Iron Wolves members being brought in for questioning. But Marcus noted their expressions, not defeated, almost expectant. They're waiting for something, he realized. This isn't over. His phone buzzed with a message from an encrypted number. The text was simple. You should have taken the money, Ghost. War's coming. Sides are being chosen. Director, Marcus called, showing her the message. We need to move faster. Whatever they're planning, it's already in motion. Chen studied the message, then turned to the tactical teams. Expand the surveillance net. I want every Iron Wolves contact tracked, every safe house breached, every piece of evidence secured before they can destroy it. Ghost, Harrison's voice carried urgency. Just got word from my contacts in military intelligence. 3 more Special Forces veterans have gone missing, all from units that handled sensitive weapons shipments. Marcus wheeled to the main display, his tactical mind processing implications. They're not just stealing weapons, he concluded. They're recruiting an army, using blackmail, threats, and corruption to turn military veterans into assets for something bigger. Through the command center's windows, dawn was breaking over Phoenix. What had started as a small-town protection racket had exposed something far more dangerous. The Iron Wolves weren't just criminals. They were soldiers in a shadow war, preparing for a conflict that would test every oath of loyalty and service. Agent Torres approached with fresh intelligence. Sir, we found something in Razor's personal files. A list of targets. Not just military bases, but veteran centers across the country. They're using them to identify and recruit vulnerable veterans. Marcus's expression hardened as he remembered the damaged community center, the veterans whose trust had been betrayed. Then we hit back harder, he stated firmly. Show them why you don't turn warriors against their own people. He turned to the tactical display, already formulating new strategies. General, get me everything you have on missing weapons and compromised veterans. Director Chen, we need to move on every location simultaneously before they can regroup. The Iron Wolves had thought they could corrupt military honor for profit. They were about to learn why that was their biggest mistake. The FBI command center erupted with activity as simultaneous raids began across 3 states. Through surveillance feeds, Marcus watched tactical teams breaching Iron Wolves' safe houses while coordinating with military police at compromised bases. Multiple weapons caches found in New Mexico, Agent Torres reported, marking locations on the tactical map. Military-grade explosives, automatic weapons, even anti-tank missiles. They were building an arsenal. Ghost, Doc's voice came through the secure line. Just intercepted communications between Razor and someone high-ranking at the Pentagon. They're calling it Operation Phoenix, something about preparing for domestic conflict. Marcus studied patterns emerging in the evidence. Each seized location revealed more connections between the Iron Wolves, corrupt military officials, and foreign intelligence agencies. They weren't just stealing weapons, he observed. They were positioning them strategically, creating hidden stockpiles across the Southwest. General Harrison's face appeared on the main screen, his expression grave. It's worse than we thought, Ghost. Found documentation at Carson Base. Lists of veterans with combat experience, special operations training. They were profiling potential recruits looking for those who could be compromised or corrupted. Using veterans' own struggles against them, Marcus concluded, his voice hardening. PTSD, financial problems, family issues, anything that could make them vulnerable to manipulation. Through the command center's windows, they watched more federal vehicles deploying. What had started as a local gang investigation had exposed a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of military command. "Sir," Torres approached with urgent intelligence, "we found something in Razor's encrypted files. Meeting scheduled for tonight. Major weapons buyer arriving at an abandoned airstrip outside Riverside Valley. Someone they call the Colonel is overseeing the deal personally." Marcus's tactical mind raced through implications. The Colonel. That's who Razor was reporting to. The one coordinating between Iron Wolves and corrupt military officials. "Ghost," Rosa's voice cut through the secure line. Elena Carson remembered something. Said she saw military transport planes landing at that airstrip late at night. Official markings, but no flight plans filed. Deputy Director Chen studied the emerging pattern. Using legitimate military flights to move illegal weapons. The corruption goes deeper than individual officers. They've infiltrated entire transportation networks. Through surveillance feeds, they watched Iron Wolves members being interrogated. Most stayed silent, but their expressions suggested confidence rather than fear. "They think they're protected," Marcus noted, "that someone powerful enough will shut this down before we reach the top." His phone buzzed with another encrypted message. "You've started a war you can't win, Ghost. Some fights are bigger than loyalty to a flag." "Director," Marcus called, showing her the message. "This goes beyond weapons trafficking. They're building infrastructure for something larger, using veterans as pawns in a game we don't fully understand yet." Chen nodded grimly. "Then we end it tonight. That airstrip meeting is our chance to catch them all. Gang leaders, weapons buyers, corrupt officials, all in one place." "Ghost," Harrison's voice carried urgency. "Just got word from my intelligence sources. That Serbian buyer? He's not just an arms dealer. He's connected to a shadow organization that's been recruiting disillusioned special operations veterans worldwide." Marcus wheeled to the tactical display, coordinating response teams. "They're building a private army," he realized, using stolen weapons, compromised veterans, and corrupted military channels to create something outside government control. Through secure channels, they monitored increasing activity around the airstrip. Iron Wolves members were establishing security perimeters while unmarked vehicles delivered equipment under cover of darkness. "Multiple high-value targets incoming," Torres reported, tracking aircraft movements. "Private jets, military transport planes, all converging on that airstrip tonight." "They're not just selling weapons," Marcus observed, noting the sophisticated security preparations. "This is a recruitment drive, showing potential allies their full capabilities." Doc's voice came through encrypted channels. "Ghost got more from Sheriff Davis. Says the Colonel was a former Delta Force commander who went off-grid after questioning his loyalties, started believing the military had lost its way. And now he's building his own force," Marcus concluded, understanding dawning. "Using Iron Wolves to identify and recruit veterans who share his disillusionment, stealing weapons to arm them, creating a shadow army loyal only to their cause." Chen studied the airstrip's layout on tactical displays. "We'll need to coordinate with multiple agencies, hit them from all sides before they realize what's happening." "No," Marcus countered, a plan forming. "They'll be watching for official response teams, expecting tactical units, but they're not watching for veterans." "What are you thinking?" Harrison asked, recognizing the strategic focus in his old friend's voice. "They've been using veteran centers to identify potential recruits," Marcus explained. "Time to show them why that was their mistake. Every veteran they threatened, every community they tried to corrupt, they're all willing to fight back." Through secure channels, he contacted Doc and Rosa. "Get our people ready. Tonight we show Iron Wolves why you don't turn warriors against their own communities." The command center mobilized as night fell over Arizona. What had started as one veteran standing against local intimidation had exposed a conspiracy that threatened the very foundation of military loyalty. But Marcus Thompson hadn't survived special forces by backing down from impossible odds. Through his tactical network, he watched veterans gathering quietly across Riverside Valley, mechanics, teachers, shop owners, all carrying themselves with the distinctive bearing of those who'd served. Iron Wolves had tried to corrupt military honor for their own purposes. They were about to learn why that was their fatal mistake. The night would end with either triumph or tragedy, but one thing was certain. It would end with warriors standing together against those who'd betrayed everything they once swore to protect. The abandoned airstrip outside Riverside Valley seemed to come alive as night fell. Through high-powered optics, Marcus watched Iron Wolves members establishing security positions while unmarked vehicles continued arriving. Doc's voice came through his secure earpiece, coordinating their response. "Our people are in position," Doc reported quietly. "Jim Carson's got mechanics covering the north approach. Rosa's group has eyes on the southern access road. Everyone's waiting for your signal." Through thermal imaging, they could see sophisticated security systems being installed around the airstrip's perimeter. "They're not just protecting a weapons deal," Marcus observed. "This is a full military-style operation." "Multiple aircraft incoming," Agent Torres announced from the mobile command post they'd established. 3 private jets, 2 military transport planes, all flying dark, no transponders. Marcus studied the Iron Wolves' deployment through his tactical scope. Their formations showed professional training, suggesting more former military members among their ranks than initially suspected. "Ghost," General Harrison's voice carried urgency through secure channels. "Just intercepted communications. The colonel isn't just coming to oversee a weapons deal. He's bringing senior military officers, ones he's turned to his cause." "How many?" Marcus asked, noting increased activity around the airstrip's main hangar. "At least 5, Harrison replied grimly. "All high-ranking, all with access to sensitive operations. The corruption runs deeper than we thought." Through their surveillance network, they watched more vehicles arriving. Expensive SUVs with diplomatic plates, unmarked vans with military-grade communications equipment. "They're creating a shadow command structure," Marcus realized, using Iron Wolves as their enforcement arm while building parallel military operations. "Ghost," Rosa's voice came through encrypted channels. "Elena Carson just called. Says she overheard something at her father's garage about Project Kingmaker, some kind of operation to identify and turn key military leaders." Marcus's tactical mind processed implications while coordinating their assembled forces. Veterans had been arriving quietly all day, taking up positions around the airstrip. Former soldiers, Marines, airmen, all united against those who'd tried to corrupt their communities. "First transport plane landing," Torres reported as engines roared overhead. Through night vision, they watched the aircraft touch down, its cargo door opening to reveal not just weapons, but sophisticated military equipment. "That's next-generation combat gear," Harrison observed. "Prototype stuff that shouldn't even exist outside classified facilities." "Show time," Marcus transmitted to his network as figures emerged from the plane. "Everyone hold position. Wait for my signal." Through his scope, he watched Razor greeting the arrivals, his usual swagger subdued in the presence of someone carrying himself with unmistakable military authority. "That's him," Doc whispered through comms. "The Colonel, David Morrison, former Delta Force commander, went off-grid 3 years ago after questioning chain-of-command decisions." Marcus studied his former colleague through optics. Morrison's bearing was still pure military, but his eyes showed something harder, more fanatical. "He's not just selling weapons," Marcus observed. "He's selling a vision, trying to convince these officers that the traditional military structure has failed." More aircraft landed as a sophisticated meeting setup was revealed inside the main hangar. Through surveillance, they watched military officers arriving, their insignias showing concerning levels of authority. "They're really doing it," Torres said quietly. "Creating their own chain of command, outside any government control." "Ghost," Harrison's voice carried warning. "Morrison's not just meeting with these officers. He's got proof of their involvement in classified operations. He's compromising them, ensuring their loyalty through blackmail." Marcus watched Morrison addressing the gathering, his gestures passionate as he pointed to displayed evidence of what he perceived as military failures. He's offering them an alternative, Marcus realized. a parallel force answering only to their own interpretation of duty. Through secured channels, Doc reported movement at all approaches. Iron Wolves members were establishing defensive positions, their tactics showing clear military training. "They're expecting trouble," Marcus noted, "but not from us. Not yet." Inside the hangar, Morrison was showcasing their arsenal, not just weapons, but advanced tactical gear, communication systems, everything needed to outfit a private military force. "This is bigger than weapons trafficking," Torres announced, monitoring intercepted communications. "They're building infrastructure for major operations." "Ghost," Rosa's urgent voice cut through. "Elena says there's more. Project Kingmaker isn't just about turning current officers. They're identifying veterans nationwide, looking for ones they can recruit or blackmail into their shadow army." Marcus's jaw tightened as he watched more military officers arriving, their presence suggesting the corruption had spread further than anyone suspected. Through his tactical network, he could sense veterans tensing in their positions, warriors who understood that tonight would determine the future of military honor itself. "Sir," Torres approached the mobile command post. "We've got enough evidence now. Federal tactical teams are standing by. Say the word and we hit them with everything." "Not yet," Marcus replied, watching Morrison lead a tour of their sophisticated operation. "First, we need to understand exactly who's involved, how deep this goes. Then we show them why you don't turn veterans against their own principles." Through the gathering darkness, Marcus coordinated their assembled forces. Not federal agents, but veterans who understood that some battles had to be fought by warriors who remembered their true oath. Morrison had built his shadow army through corruption and compromise. He was about to learn why true military honor couldn't be bought or blackmailed. The night wind carried the sound of more aircraft approaching as Marcus prepared his people for what would become the most important operation of their lives. The Iron Wolves thought they were showcasing their power. Instead, they were about to witness why you never underestimate veterans fighting to protect everything they once swore to defend. The airstrip's main hangar had become a showcase of military power. Through surveillance feeds, Marcus watched Morrison presenting their capabilities to assembled officers, his former Delta Force authority evident in every gesture. Advanced weapons, tactical gear, and sophisticated command systems demonstrated resources that shouldn't exist outside official channels. "They're discussing deployment zones," Torres reported, monitoring intercepted communications, planning to establish hidden bases across multiple states, creating a parallel military infrastructure. Through his scope, Marcus studied the gathered officials, generals, intelligence officers, even foreign military attachés, each one compromised, either through blackmail or ideology. "Ghost," Doc's voice carried urgency through secure channels. "Got movement at the perimeter. Iron Wolves are bringing in more than just weapons. Looks like prisoners." Marcus adjusted his optics, watching vehicles approach under heavy guard. "Elena was right," he transmitted through their network. "They're showcasing their full operation, not just military capabilities, but their ability to control through intimidation." "Multiple targets identified," Agent Torres announced. "Senior military officers, foreign buyers, compromised officials, everyone we've been tracking, all in one place." Through thermal imaging, they watched more figures being escorted into the hangar, civilians under guard, their movements suggesting restraints. "Those aren't willing recruits," Marcus observed grimly. "They're using family members as leverage, ensuring loyalty through threats." "Ghost," General Harrison's voice cut through encrypted channels. "Morrison's giving them a demonstration, not just of weapons but of their intelligence-gathering capabilities. He's showing how deeply they've infiltrated military command structures." Inside the hangar, Morrison activated sophisticated display systems revealing surveillance data on military operations worldwide. He's not just selling weapons, Marcus realized. He's selling access, showing how their shadow network can compromise any official military action. "Sir," Torres approached with urgent intelligence, "intercepted communication suggests this isn't just a sales pitch. Morrison's planning to activate sleeper cells tonight. Veterans they've recruited or blackmailed in key positions across the country." Through their tactical network, Marcus coordinated with positioned veterans. Jim Carson's mechanics had secured the north approach. Rosa's team monitored the southern access road, all waiting for the signal, warriors ready to stand against those who'd betrayed their oath. Multiple aircraft on approach, Doc reported. More officials arriving. Morrison's building to something big. Marcus watched through high-powered optics as Morrison gathered his audience around a central display. Project Kingmaker, the former Delta commander announced, his voice carried clearly through their surveillance. Tonight, we demonstrate why the traditional military structure has failed, why a new force is needed, one unbound by political constraints. Ghost, Rosa's voice carried warning. Elena says they're moving more prisoners in through the back, including military families they're using as leverage. Marcus's tactical mind processed options while monitoring Morrison's presentation. The former commander was showcasing their intelligence-gathering capabilities, proving how deeply they'd compromised military security. They don't just want to build a parallel force, Marcus transmitted to his network. They want to render official military command structures ineffective. Through thermal imaging, they watched Iron Wolves members escorting more arrivals, officers whose presence suggested the corruption had spread further than anyone suspected. "Sir," Torres reported urgently, "Morrison's preparing to activate their network. Once those sleeper cells are triggered, they'll have operatives in key positions across the country," Marcus finished, ready to compromise any official military response. Through secure channels, he coordinated with their assembled veterans. "All units prepare for engagement. Remember, these aren't just criminals. They're trained military who've lost their way." "Ghost," Harrison's voice carried command authority. "Federal tactical teams are in position. Say the word and we hit them with everything." "Not yet," Marcus replied, watching Morrison build to his presentation's climax. "First, we show them something they've forgotten. Why true warriors fight for principles, not power." Through their surveillance network, they watched Morrison activating sophisticated communication systems, preparing to trigger their sleeper network. "Tonight," the former commander announced, "we demonstrate why loyalty to our cause is stronger than loyalty to a failing system." "Ghost," Doc's urgent voice cut through. "They're bringing in more leveraged families, using them to ensure cooperation from officers who might resist." Marcus's jaw tightened as he watched Morrison's operation unfold. The former Delta commander had built his shadow army through corruption and compromise, forgetting the most important military principle: true warriors fought for honor, not power. "All units," Marcus transmitted through their secure network, "prepare for Phase 1. Show them why you never turn veterans against their own communities." Through night vision, he watched their positioned forces tightening the noose. Not federal agents, but veterans who understood that some battles had to be fought by warriors who remembered their true oath. Morrison raised his hand, preparing to activate his network. But before he could give the signal, the night erupted with coordinated precision. Veterans emerged from concealed positions, their movements showing years of combat experience. Iron Wolves found themselves engaged by warriors who understood real battle, not just tactical training. "Ghost," Torres reported with growing urgency. "Morrison's trying to trigger his sleeper cells. If those compromised officers activate—" "They won't," Marcus replied confidently, watching their operation unfold. "Because tonight we remind everyone why military honor can't be bought or blackmailed. It can only be earned through sacrifice and service." The battle for the airstrip had begun, but it was more than just a tactical engagement. It was a fight for the very soul of military loyalty. And Marcus Thompson intended to show Morrison why you never underestimate veterans fighting to protect everything they once swore to defend. The airstrip erupted in coordinated chaos as Marcus's veterans executed their assault with military precision. Through tactical displays, he watched Morrison's security forces scrambling to respond, caught off guard by an attack from fellow warriors they'd never expected to face. "North sector secured," Jim Carson reported through encrypted channels. His mechanics-turned warriors had disabled the Iron Wolves' vehicles with practiced efficiency, cutting off escape routes. These boys forgot that veterans come in all shapes and sizes. "Ghost," Doc's voice carried urgency. "Morrison's trying to reach his communications center. If he activates those sleeper cells—" "Not happening," Marcus transmitted, watching Rose's team systematically neutralizing the sophisticated command systems. Years of coffee shop operations had given her people perfect cover to map the airstrip's layout, identifying every crucial target. Through his scope, Marcus tracked Morrison's movement as the former Delta commander realized his carefully planned demonstration was unraveling. Who dares? Morrison's voice carried over intercepted channels, a commander's authority tinged with growing desperation. Warriors who remember their oath, Marcus replied, broadcasting on frequencies he knew Morrison would recognize. Veterans who understand that loyalty can't be bought or blackmailed. Inside the hangar, chaos erupted as compromised officers realized their presence at this secret gathering was being documented. Through surveillance feeds, they watched sophisticated recording systems capturing every face, every interaction, proof of corruption that couldn't be denied. Ghost, Torres reported urgently. Morrison's security team is moving prisoners toward transport planes, using families as shields. Marcus's tactical mind processed options while coordinating their response. All units execute Phase 2, he commanded. Show them the difference between mercenaries and true warriors. Through their network, veterans moved with synchronized precision. Jim Carson's mechanics breached the hangar's rear entrance while Rosa's team secured the communications center. Years of community service had hidden their real capabilities. Warriors who'd never stopped training, never stopped preparing to defend what mattered. "You're making a mistake," Morrison broadcast, his voice carrying over emergency channels. "The system is broken. We're building something stronger, pure military authority without political constraints." "No," Marcus replied, watching their forces systematically dismantling Morrison's operation. "You forgot what real strength is. It's not about power or control. It's about protecting those who need protection." Through thermal imaging, they tracked Iron Wolves members realizing they were outmatched. These weren't federal agents following procedures. These were combat veterans fighting with the precision that only real battlefield experience could teach. "Ghost," Elena's voice cut through secure channels. "Found the blackmail files, everything they used to compromise military officers, including proof of who's really been funding their operation." Morrison's response was immediate and violent. "Burn it all," he commanded his remaining loyal forces. "Destroy every record. No evidence of Project Kingmaker can survive." But Marcus had anticipated this. Through their surveillance network, they watched Doc's team securing crucial evidence while other veterans engaged Morrison's security forces. The difference between mercenaries and warriors became clear as corrupted soldiers faced veterans fighting for principles rather than profit. "Sir," Torres approached with urgent intelligence, "Morrison's trying to trigger some kind of failsafe, electromagnetic pulse device. He's planning to fry every system in range, destroy all digital evidence." "Let him try," Marcus replied calmly, watching their operation unfold. "Some things can't be erased, like the memory of what real military honor means." Through secure channels, they monitored Morrison's growing desperation as his forces encountered real resistance. These weren't civilians to be intimidated or officials to be bribed. These were warriors who remembered why they'd first sworn to serve. "Ghost," Harrison's voice carried command authority. "Federal teams are moving in. Say the word, and we end this with overwhelming force." "Not yet," Marcus responded, watching Morrison realize his carefully constructed shadow army was crumbling. "First, we show him something important. Why you never turn veterans against their own principles." The battle for the airstrip intensified as Morrison's remaining loyal forces fought with increasing desperation. But they faced something their corruption hadn't prepared them for: warriors united by purpose rather than profit, fighting to protect rather than control. Multiple officers surrendering, Doc reported through tactical channels. Turning on Morrison, offering evidence in exchange for consideration. The ones he blackmailed are breaking free. Through surveillance feeds, they watched Morrison's expression change as he realized his network was unraveling. The corrupt officers he'd gathered were choosing redemption over power, remembering oaths they'd once sworn to uphold. "You can't stop what's coming," Morrison broadcast, his voice carrying the edge of a cornered predator. "The system is weak. Real power belongs to those strong enough to take it." "No," Marcus replied, coordinating their final push. Real strength comes from standing together, from remembering why we served in the first place, from protecting communities instead of corrupting them. The night erupted in final fury as Morrison triggered his fail-safe device. But Marcus's veterans had prepared for this too, their equipment hardened against electronic attack. Through the chaos, they moved with coordinated precision, demonstrating why experience would always overcome mere tactical training. The Iron Wolves had thought they could build an army through corruption and compromise. Instead, they faced warriors who remembered that true military honor couldn't be bought or blackmailed. It could only be earned through sacrifice and service to something greater than oneself. Morrison's operation was crumbling, but Marcus knew the real battle wasn't over. The fight to protect veteran communities from corruption had just begun, and warriors who remembered their true purpose would lead the way. Morrison made his final stand in the airstrip's main hangar, surrounded by evidence of his corrupted vision. Through tactical displays, Marcus watched the former Delta commander's remaining forces fighting with desperate intensity, but they faced something their training hadn't prepared them for: veterans united in righteous purpose. "Ghost," Doc reported through secure channels. "Morrison's trying to reach the backup communications array, still attempting to trigger those sleeper cells." Marcus coordinated their response while monitoring the battle through surveillance feeds. "Not this time," he transmitted to his network. "Show him why you never corrupt warriors who understand real loyalty." Through thermal imaging, they watched Jim Carson's team securing the northern perimeter, while Rosa's veterans systematically disabled Morrison's sophisticated equipment. The difference between mercenaries and true warriors showed in every engagement. "You're destroying everything we built," Morrison's voice carried over emergency frequencies. "A force strong enough to reshape military power itself." "No," Marcus replied, watching their veterans demonstrate precision born of real combat experience. "We're protecting everything we swore to defend, the communities you tried to corrupt, the principles you forgot." Inside the hangar, chaos erupted as more compromised officers surrendered, choosing redemption over Morrison's twisted vision. Through surveillance feeds, they watched his carefully constructed network crumbling in real time. "Ghost," Elena's urgent voice cut through encrypted channels. "Found something in their files. Project Kingmaker wasn't just about creating a shadow army. They were planning to trigger coordinated strikes against military command structures, create chaos they could exploit." Marcus's tactical mind processed implications while directing their forces. Morrison hadn't just been building parallel military capabilities. He'd been preparing for full-scale insurrection. "Sir," Torres approached with critical intelligence, "Morrison's activating some kind of dead man switch. If he goes down, automated systems will broadcast compromising information about every officer he's blackmailed." Through their network, Marcus watched veterans moving with coordinated precision, securing evidence while engaging Morrison's forces. Years of community service had hidden their true capabilities. Warriors who'd never stopped preparing to defend what mattered. "You think this ends with me?" Morrison broadcast, his voice carrying the authority that had once commanded respect. "The system you're protecting is already corrupted. We just exposed its weakness." "No," Marcus replied, watching their operation systematically dismantling Morrison's power. "You exposed something else. Why true military honor can't be bought or compromised. Why veterans united will always be stronger than mercenaries divided." The battle for the airstrip reached its climax as Morrison's remaining loyal forces realized they faced more than just tactical opposition. These weren't federal agents following procedures. These were combat veterans fighting with the unshakable conviction of warriors who remembered their true purpose. "Ghost," Doc's voice carried urgency. "Morrison's security team is making a final push, using advanced tactical gear trying to reach the evidence storage." But Marcus had anticipated this. Through surveillance feeds, they watched veteran teams responding with coordinated precision. The Iron Wolves had thought military training made them invincible. Instead, they learned why experience would always overcome mere tactics. Multiple officers providing testimony, Torres reported, exposing the full scope of Project Kingmaker, international connections, corrupt officials, everything. Through secure channels, They monitored Morrison's growing desperation as his forces encountered real resistance. These weren't civilians to be intimidated or officials to be bribed. These were warriors who remembered why they'd first sworn to serve. "You can't erase what we've started," Morrison broadcast, his voice carrying the edge of defeat. "Others will continue what we began. The system is too weak to survive." "The system isn't weak," Marcus replied, coordinating their final push. "It's protected by veterans who remember their oath. Warriors who understand that strength comes from standing together, not selling out." Through thermal imaging, they watched Morrison's last defenders, realizing they faced something their corruption hadn't prepared them for: the unbreakable bond between warriors united in righteous purpose. "Ghost," Harrison's voice carried command authority. "Federal teams are in position, ready to take Morrison into custody." "Not yet," Marcus responded, watching the former Delta commander's expression change as he realized his network was truly finished. "First, he needs to understand something important: why you never bet against veterans fighting for what's right." The night erupted in final fury as Morrison triggered his dead man's switch. But Marcus's veterans had prepared for this too, their cyber teams already neutralizing automated systems. Through the chaos, they moved with practiced efficiency, demonstrating why true loyalty would always overcome mere obedience. "It's over, Colonel," Marcus transmitted on frequencies he knew Morrison would recognize. "Your shadow army is exposed. Your network is compromised. The veterans you tried to corrupt have remembered their real purpose." Through their surveillance network, they watched Morrison's remaining forces laying down arms, choosing honor over power. The corrupt officers he'd gathered were turning on him, offering evidence in exchange for a chance at redemption. "You don't understand what you've done," Morrison broadcast, his voice carrying genuine anguish. "The system needs to change. Real warriors deserve real power." "No," Marcus replied, watching veterans secure the airstrip with coordinated precision. "Real warriors understand that power without principle is meaningless. That true strength comes from protecting what matters, not controlling it." The Iron Wolves had thought they could build an empire through corruption and compromise. Instead, they faced warriors who remembered that military honor couldn't be bought or blackmailed. It could only be earned through sacrifice and service to something greater than oneself. Morrison's operation was finished, but Marcus knew their mission wasn't over. The fight to protect veteran communities from corruption had just begun, and warriors who remembered their true purpose would lead the way. Dawn broke over the Riverside Valley airstrip as federal agents processed evidence of Morrison's operation. Through command center displays, Marcus watched the full scope of Project Kingmaker being exposed: weapons caches, blackmail files, evidence of corruption reaching into the highest levels of military command. "Final count," Agent Torres reported, updating their tactical boards: 37 corrupt officers in custody, over 200 compromised officials identified, weapons stockpiles recovered in 5 states. Through secure channels, Doc coordinated with veterans securing crucial evidence, while Rose's team helped freed families reunite. The night's battle had proven something profound: that true military honor couldn't be corrupted when warriors stood together. "Ghost?" Harrison's voice carried satisfaction through encrypted communications. "Morrison's talking. Giving up everything. Foreign connections, shadow financiers, the whole network. Says there's no point hiding it anymore, not after what happened here." Marcus wheeled through the hangar where Morrison's demonstration had turned into his downfall. "He forgot something important," he observed, watching veterans carefully documenting evidence. "You can't build lasting power through corruption. Real strength comes from protecting what matters." "Sir," Elena approached with fresh intelligence, "found complete records of their recruitment operation. Every veteran they tried to compromise, every family they threatened. We can help them all now." Through surveillance feeds, they watched more federal teams arriving as morning light revealed the battle's full impact. The sophisticated command center Morrison had built lay in ruins, destroyed not by federal forces, but by veterans who remembered their true purpose. "Ghost," Doc's voice carried quiet pride. "Jim Carson just called. Says veterans are mobilizing in other towns too, standing up against corruption, protecting their communities, What happened here? It's spreading. Marcus studied tactical displays showing Morrison's network being dismantled across multiple states. The Iron Wolves had thought they could turn military training against the system itself. Instead, they'd awakened something far stronger, the unbreakable bond between warriors who remembered their oath. Latest from Washington, Torres reported. Congressional committees are being formed. Morrison's evidence is exposing corruption at every level. Real change is coming. Through the command center's windows, they watched more veterans arriving. Not for battle now, but to help rebuild. The community center Morrison had tried to destroy would become something stronger, a symbol of resistance against those who would corrupt military honor. Found something else in their files, Elena added, her voice carrying new purpose. Other veteran centers they targeted, communities they tried to corrupt. They're all reaching out now, wanting to know how we fought back. Then we show them, Marcus replied, watching Morrison being led away under heavy guard. Help them build the same networks we did. Teach them why Veterans United can never be truly defeated. Through secure channels, they monitored the operation's final phases. The weapons were being secured, the evidence protected, the corrupted officials facing justice. But something more important had been achieved. A reminder of why true warriors fought not for power, but for principle. What you built here. Harrison's voice carried respect through their tactical network. It's more than just stopping Morrison. You showed veterans everywhere that they're not alone, that their communities can be protected. Marcus watched the sun rising over Riverside Valley, its light revealing both battle scars and new beginnings. The Iron Wolves had thought they could control veterans through corruption and compromise. Instead, they'd learned why you never underestimate warriors who remembered their true purpose. Ghost, Doc approached with quiet determination. Other towns are asking for help setting up their own protection networks. Veterans everywhere wanting to stand against corruption. Then we help them, Marcus replied, watching his community begin to heal. Show them what we learned here. That real strength isn't about controlling power. It's about protecting what matters, standing together against those who would corrupt everything we fought for. Through the morning light, they watched veterans continuing to arrive. Mechanics, teachers, coffee shop owners, all carrying themselves with the quiet dignity of warriors who'd found renewed purpose. Morrison had tried to build an army through corruption. Instead, he'd awakened something far stronger. A network of veterans united in defending their communities from any who would threaten them. Sir, Torres reported one final time. Morrison's last words before federal custody? You've started something you can't control. What do you think he meant? Marcus smiled, watching his veterans help rebuild what corruption had tried to destroy. He's right, but not the way he thinks. We've started something that can't be controlled because it's built on real strength. Veterans protecting their communities, warriors standing together, honor that can't be bought or corrupted. The battle for Riverside Valley was over, but its impact was just beginning. Through his command center windows, Marcus watched the sun rise on a new day, one where veterans everywhere were remembering their true purpose, not as weapons to be wielded, but as warriors united in protecting everything worth fighting for. The Iron Wolves had thought they'd found an easy target in a disabled veteran. Instead, they'd learned why you never underestimate warriors who remember their oath, and why true military honor, once awakened, could never be corrupted or controlled. In the weeks following Morrison's arrest, the Riverside Valley Community Center had become something more than just a gathering place. Through the repaired windows, Marcus watched veterans from across the state arriving, not for battle now, but for guidance in protecting their own communities. Final reports from federal investigators, Doc announced, updating their situation boards. Project Kingmaker exposed corruption in 12 states, over 400 compromised officials identified. 8 major weapons trafficking operations shut down. Through their expanding network, they monitored positive changes rippling outward from that night at the airstrip. Veterans in other towns were standing up, building their own protection networks, refusing to let corruption take root in their communities. Ghost, Rosa approached with fresh intelligence from her growing information network. 3 more veteran centers contacted us today. They're implementing our security protocols, establishing their own community defense teams. Marcus studied the map, showing their influence spreading. What had started as one town's resistance had become a movement. Veterans everywhere remembering why they'd first sworn to serve. Latest from Washington, Torres reported through secure channels. Morrison's testimony is still exposing connections. International weapons dealers, corrupt military contractors, shadow financiers. The whole network is unraveling. Through command center displays, they watched other communities following Riverside Valley's example. Jim Carson's auto shop had become a training center, teaching veterans how to identify and resist corruption. Rosa's coffee shop hosted strategy meetings where warriors shared techniques for protecting their towns. Something else, Elena added, her voice carrying quiet pride. The families Morrison threatened? They're speaking out now, helping other veterans resist similar intimidation, showing that standing together is stronger than giving in. Marcus wheeled through the community center where it had all started. The Iron Wolves' attempt to corrupt this place had instead transformed it into a symbol of resistance, a beacon for veterans who refused to let their communities be controlled through fear. Ghost. Harrison's encrypted transmission carried satisfaction. Congressional oversight committees are implementing new protections for veteran support programs, real safeguards against the kind of corruption Morrison tried to spread. Through their surveillance network, they monitored positive changes continuing to unfold. The weapons had been secured, the corrupt officials facing justice, but something more important had been achieved. Veterans everywhere were remembering their true strength came from standing together. Sir, Torres approached one final time, other federal agencies are asking to study your community defense model. They want to understand how Veterans United can protect against corruption. Marcus smiled, watching more warriors arrive to learn from their experience. Show them what we learned here, that real power isn't about control or corruption. It's about veterans protecting their communities, standing together against anyone who would threaten what we fought for. The sun set over Riverside Valley as their network continued to grow. Through the community center windows, Marcus watched veterans heading home, mechanics, teachers, coffee shop owners, all carrying themselves with renewed purpose. Morrison had tried to build an army through corruption. Instead, he'd awakened something far stronger, warriors who remembered their true oath. The Iron Wolves had thought they found an easy target in a disabled veteran. Their mistake had exposed corruption, awakened resistance, and reminded veterans everywhere why they first chose to serve. Now, as Marcus watched his community thrive, he knew the most important battle had been won, not just against corruption, but for the soul of military honor itself. Some fights chose you, and when they did, true warriors stood together. That was the lesson of Riverside Valley, and it would echo wherever veterans gathered to protect what mattered most: their communities, their principles, and their unbreakable bond as warriors who remembered their oath.